wanted to know if you've seen GameStop, the utilization of shares 100% for 91 days. We're up 60% in the past since May.
Who cares, I guess, is my...
40% of the float is directly registered.
Like, who cares? It sounds like you're playing a video game with the stock market.
We kind of are. We're going to win.
Yeah, but what's winning?
Phone numbers.
What does that mean?
The ticker reaches phone numbers.
Okay, but that's never happened before. And in the history of finance, when you try to play a video game with the stock market, what ends up happening, as you may know, or if you don't, this could be helpful, is that they change the rules of the game. Nelson Hunt, the Hunt brothers, tried to do this with silver futures a long time ago. And they bought all the silver futures, and they had enough money to buy them, and they had some friends helping them. And guess what happened? The Federal Reserve and the government said, okay, you can no longer buy this many silver futures. And then the price of silver crashed. So to me, why would I waste my time playing a video game with the stock market that I know is probably not going to end well, because I'm not buying a stock that's worth a lot of money. I think you'll even concede that. Like, the reason you might be interested in the stock is because you want to break some short sellers. You want to make money, which is fine. Like, I want to make money too. Some people think I'm really unscrupulous in how much money I want to make. So I'm with you on the making money part, but like, why take the risk of buying a stock in a company that's not worth very much? It's a gamble that you can break the rules of the stock market. And it's hard to break the rules of the stock market. There are people who don't want you to break those rules. There are people that like those rules. Those people are the SEC, the Congress, the government. They don't want you to do this. They will stop you from doing this somehow. I don't know how, by the way, because it seems like a pretty good mousetrap. But why do it, I guess, is the question. Markets, the rules of markets can change based on what happens to the markets and the participants. So, like, there's nothing to stop the SEC from delisting GameStop, just to delist it and be like, the market's broken, they'll cancel those trades. You're really trying to break a system that's bigger than you. And what's interesting about the GameStop experiment, which is what I would call it, because we don't know how it's going to end, you have to be really careful about how you want to go about this. And again, it's a hive mind. So I think the biggest problem with GameStop is maybe even less so the kind of like infinite money scheme that's trying to take place, but the lack of awareness that, like, for example, let's say 𝐷𝗀𝐻𝐿 and I, all of a sudden, we want to do this thing with GameStop, right? 𝐷𝗀𝐻𝐿 puts $5 million in GameStop and certificates his shares, meaning they're no longer in DWAC. He can't trade them in a stock brokerage account, right? He basically has a certificate in his drawer, and he's putting his certificate in a drawer, and he's saying, I'm not ever going to sell this, okay? And he buys the stock for, what's the current stock price, 150?
Yeah, $150.
Okay, so you do that, and I say, you know what? Good show, mate. I really think this is a good idea. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm buying $5 million of GameStop stock. Let's say it's $50 million. $50 million of GameStop stock for $200. And then another guy does the same thing for $300. And let's say it goes to $5,000. Eventually 𝐷𝗀𝐻𝐿's going to take the stock certificate out of his desk and say, you know what? Thank you guys. I've had a good time. Whether it's due to a loss in another trade or just due to, let's say he wants to donate his money or he wants to give it away, it's time to go, right? Because the stock's up a lot. I mean, what are you going to do? I'm not going to hold this thing forever.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, each and everyone in the stock market is here to make money. That's their end goal.
Yeah, at enough percentages, enough 10x's, 20x's, you're going to sell because you have your goals. I have my goals. I didn't promise I'd be in this thing forever. So I think all the people in the world can certificate their GameStop and take it off the stock market and make it unavailable for shorting and this and that. But at enough of a price, say 2,000 or 3,000, they will sell again. And I think there's an underestimation of what that price is. A lot of people will sell at 200 and before it can even go up enough. Now, again, it's a cool idea. And maybe what happens is GameStop basically just goes private. And that's all well and good. But again, I don't want to play this game, in essence, this experiment, this video game with the stock market. Like, stock market is fine for me without this nonsense. Could you do this to another stock? Maybe. Could you do this to GameStop? Sure, why not? But ultimately, I think the goal is to make money with the methods and tools we're comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with this at all. It happened with Hertz, right? Hertz had a similar situation. So I think that the Wall Street Bets movement is awesome. Don't get me wrong. But I want everybody to make money too. And I don't think hacking the stock market, basically, which is what this is the way to do it. I think prudent investing is the way to do it. But people in Wall Street Bets don't want to do prudent investing. At least a lot of them don't. Some of them do, of course. There's a lot of people in Wall Street Bets now, so you can't speak for all of them. But the people in the GameStop thing, like that's not prudent investing. That's a get-rich-quick scheme.
At the beginning, I 100% agree. And now they have a Web3 wallet, NFT marketplace.
But isn't that just gimmicks to get people staying in? That's just
I don't think
gimmicks,
so.
in my opinion.
They got no.
It's like AMC is accepting Dogecoin for payments. Like it's just gimmicks to get people staying there. Like AMC gave out investors an NFT. Like, do you know how absurd that sounds? Like, if you asked me 5 years ago and tell me, oh, a dying movie as a business is gonna give you NFTs to stay as a shareholder, I'll be laughing at you.
Well, that's fine. I mean, let them do that. I think that, the goal, though...
No, but one thing that I would say blows my mind is the CEO has sold more than half of his equity, and he tells people, no, yeah, it's the future. Keep on holding, the AMC's up.
Yeah, I would sell too if I were him.
I mean, if the share count is up 5x,
I'm getting stock for free. Sure, I'm selling it. Kind of like trying to play a game with the stock market when your goal as a CEO of a company is to make a more valuable company, not to like goose your stock price by these mechanics. The mechanics are interesting. They do affect everybody, and to the extent that you can make money on it, God bless, right? Like at the end of the day, making $1 from abusing basically the mechanics of the stock market and making $1 from prudent investing is the same dollar buys you the same amount of stuff, right? So like,
how is
dollars to dollar
holding the stock abusing?
It's not. But I think that the idea that by coordinating a purchasing campaign, in essence, and sort of like trying to do basically like a leverage buyout on a distributed basis, it's an interesting idea. But again, I'd rather have a business where the CEO's focused on growing the company and the company has good fundamentals and stuff like that. And I know that they have a new turnaround underway, and hopefully it succeeds. But I don't know, the price of the stock doesn't seem to match up with the value of the company. Good businesses get bought out by private equity or Berkshire Hathaway or things like that, or they stay public. But I agree. Like, there's some hope. I mean, I don't want to completely shut it down. I mean, I really like the idea that people, the average person, so to speak, can get more involved in investing, and I want to help them. I just also don't want to throw people off a cliff, if that makes sense. Like,
but don't you think the average person, I would say the goal is a bit different? They want to 10 extra money in a week and get out, right?
I don't know what I'm trying to say is that for people to be interested in the stock, more people to be interested in the stock market and take their fate into their own hands, I think is a good thing, which is kind of what like Wall Street Bets is doing. It's almost like an evolution experiment. Like, you have these guys trying to trade. Okay, it's not working. It's difficult. Well, maybe we should the short seller stock. Okay, that works. Cool. Let's try this. It's like experimenting, like a hive mind experimenting, and it's cool. It worked, obviously. GameStop's up a lot, right? The average investor, if there's real such thing as diamond hands, this scheme, and there's no other.
That's the dumbest thing I ever.
Right, but if
stocks up, $100 don't sell for what? Like, cash out and run.
At $1,000, everybody's cashing out, right? And so the problem is, at $900, everybody's cashing out. At $800, at $700, $600, $500, right? I have no reason to bet against it. I have no reason to dislike it. I hope you guys do get it to phone numbers. $1 trillion market cap. Why not? Go ahead. Listen. That's why Buffett doesn't short sell, right? I mean, that you can't You cannot deny what you just said. You have to have talent to do that, though. That's the hard part. No, I am a market neutral guy. I mean, that's been my mantra forever. In biotech, it's a really great thing because there's a lot of bad biotech companies out there, and there's a lot of good ones, and it's kind of like self-explanatory to figure out which one is which. I mean, it's really easy. You know, it's easy for me maybe because I have a talent for biopharma, but I know the industry really well. But to me, it's like fairly straightforward. Tiger used to be really, really good at this stuff, but then they became kind of like long only, basically. Growing outside of the U.S., always difficult for MNCs given, you know, China and India have very little pricing, and you know, Europe's always sort of mature market similar to the U.S. So, you know, eventually, you know, the rest of the world will look bigger than the U.S. for most of these countries for most products, but as of right now, there's no country, no territory quite like the U.S. How slow do large medtech companies move internally? Good question. I think pretty slowly. It depends. Each management team's different. You know, Boston Scientific's probably the less skilled than, say, Medtronic or something, but I'd say the bigger companies just have a hard time being nimble in most industries. Warren Buffett's view on crypto. I don't think Warren Buffett's view on crypto is too important, given he doesn't understand technology in general, so his view on technology is probably not the first place I'd go. Nor is Bill Gates, mind you. Bill Gates' view is probably not that interesting either. I wouldn't say Warren Buffett's an investor of the past. I think he's just not particularly an investor of the future. He doesn't know technology. I mean, that's clear. I don't think he'd even dispute that. Yeah, I mean, business is a numbers game. You know, if you don't enjoy numbers, business isn't for you. I think I learned my process through watching other people, for sure. Trial and error, theoretical growth. In pharma, it's funny. You just have to understand each drug. It's kind of a funny... Pharmaceuticals aren't cyclical 5K4. There's no cyclicality here. Even in the worst of depressions, drug company... drug sales don't change much.
And I do know a lot about business and healthcare, and I know that our country's going broke. And I know that we're not going to have a country to talk about if we keep spending more money than we bring in, and if we keep asking the debt markets to support our bonds. It's really a disaster in the making. Every great empire has had the same thing happen to it. This is how they fail. There's arrogance that, we'll always be number one, and nobody will ever not buy our debt. And of course, it happened to the Netherlands. It happened to London. It happened in different empires across time. That arrogance stretches into peril. Russia went bankrupt in '98. Argentina, Venezuela gone bankrupt multiple times. Greece went bankrupt. You know, it can happen to us. And I think that by spending more money than you have is a fast way to do that. I think we need to get back to a couple of years of surplus. We haven't had a surplus since Bill Clinton. You know, those are the things I know about. You know, when it comes to reforming politics, look, it's a huge problem. It's been a problem before me. It'll be a problem after me. And I don't pretend I'm Superman. I don't pretend that I know everything and I can fix everything and I have a plan for everything, which is another part of the problem with our politicians, is that, you know, in Congress, you're asked to know everything and understand everything and have a plan for everything. And the reality is, look, nobody is that smart. Nobody is that well informed. Nobody's really that good. And at the end of the day, it's, you know, we're better off sort of being specialists at what we do know and having folks who trust each other. And I think that, you know, if there was somebody in Congress that I really trust in foreign policy, I'd probably just vote with them. But another prosecution that was really interesting is the so-called Varsity Blues prosecution, where the FBI went after, no joke, went after people who were cheating on their SATs and parents who helped get their kids into colleges they didn't deserve to get into. Now, look, I don't think that's a good thing. And I've made fun of people like that their whole lives because their kids don't end up being any more successful just because they went to a certain college. If your kid's not going to be successful, they're not going to be successful. It's not going to make a difference. But, you know, rich parents want the best for their kids. And they sometimes bend the rules to get their kids into the right places. And the FBI opened an investigation and arrested like 100 people over this. Almost nobody went to jail. A couple of people went to jail for a few weeks. This was not a good use of government resources. And, you know, maybe this investigation cost $5 million, but at the end of the day, it's not about $5 million. It's about this general attitude towards not prioritizing, not thinking about it like a business, not prioritizing what do we want out of the FBI. Do we want them to go after the worst criminals, the crimes that affect real people every day, or do we want them investigating who cheated on their SAT? You know, it's really just something that the reason this is happening is the FBI is too big. They've gone after all the real crime. They've went after it. So at this point, they're inventing crimes to go after. It's really just gotten to a point where there's too much resources in the FBI. The same thing applies to the NSA. The same thing applies to the CIA. The same thing applies to the FDA, the DOJ. All of these groups have too much to do on their hands. The SEC, you mentioned the guy at the SEC. I think the SEC has to exist, for better or worse. You know, somebody has to regulate. Publicly traded companies have to be monitored because ultimately there is an incentive to lie, steal, and cheat. And we have a great public market, it's the best in the world. And I think it should largely be limited to that. The publicly traded companies, the Apples, the Microsofts, and the smaller companies should have to file their 10Qs and 10Ks with the SEC, but the SEC could probably be 80 to 90% smaller. And the funny thing about fraud is that we have 5 or 6 different organizations that are all responsible for fraud. You have the SEC on the civil side, you have the CFPB and the CFTC on the civil side, but then you have the DOJ and on the criminal side, as well as other organizations that can bring charges. The Secret Service can bring charges, the HHS can bring charges, and it's just a whole amalgamation of like...
The CFTC...
I don't think they can bring criminal ones, but I think that like the whole point of...
The DOJ can do criminal, I believe.
Yes, right? The Secret Service, the post office inspector can arrest you. There's a couple of funny ones. The HHS, I'm sorry, Department of Homeland Security, DHS. Yeah. Yep.
Well, those make sense. Post office, though? Really?
Post office inspector.
Really?
They have a fraud division within the post office. They come up with some pretty good stuff, actually. It's like very underfunded, I think, but they actually can arrest you for all kinds of fraud. And believe it or not, they do a decent job. But the point is, like, we're looking for fraud in places that doesn't exist. There was an arrest of a very prominent Google engineer, very famous, very wealthy guy who helped create the self-driving car industry. And he left Google's Waymo to go to Uber, and they arrested him. They said, "You're stealing trade secrets." And it's this power between big companies and big law firms and government. And in this case, I hate the word deep state because it makes me sound like a QAnon conspiracy theorist. But the deep state of the prosecutor's office, prosecutors are not elected. And, you know, if a big law firm person gets a call from Google, Google's a $20 million account at Cooley or whatever other law firm, and that big law firm says, "Oh, we want to keep Google happy, don't we?" Of course we do. So what does the people at Google want? Well, they're telling us there's a guy who just left Google to go to a competitor, and that sucks for Google. Well, what can we do about it? Well, we can sue the guy. No, we need something bigger than that. Well, let's get the guy arrested. How are we going to get the guy arrested? I don't know. Theft of trade secrets? Well, what prosecutor is going to do that? Oh, well, I went to law school with John, and I was in the prosecutor's office with John for a couple of years. And, you know, John's probably going to want a job after he does his government rounds. And he's going to want a multi-million-dollar job here at our firm. So let's go arrest this guy and or tell him to do that. And then a couple of years later, you know what? He'll be over here at this law firm or that law firm, and he'll be making millions of dollars. And that's the way it works. Goldman Sachs had a quant trader who left Goldman Sachs, Russian guy, left Goldman Sachs to join a hedge fund, took computer code with him, okay? He emailed himself computer code to his personal account. The FBI said that was an attempt to steal trade secrets. The guy did 7 years in prison. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I sent this email to myself to work on this buggy code. Goldman Sachs asked me to because I'm a programmer. That's literally my job. And this code actually sucks. We would never use this at our hedge fund. It's way undercooked. It's not good enough. But I'm just trying to do my job. And all of a sudden, I've got arrested for stealing trade secrets." And he was found guilty, or he pled guilty, actually. And, you know, he got a 7-year sentence. I mean, it was really insane. So the power that a Goldman Sachs or Google has over a law firm, which has power over a prosecutor's office, has gotten to a point of insanity where not only that, take a look at Letitia James, our attorney general here in New York. our aspiring governor, or AG, or Attorney General, depending
Don't
on
get me started.
how you look at it, she uses her power exclusively to beat up on the other party, which again, you know, it's not a problem if you're a Democrat. I have a lot of friends that are Democrats, but they don't use their power just to mess with Republicans. And Republicans shouldn't use their power just to mess with Democrats. It's really the sign of a country going down the tubes when that starts to happen. Because, you know, your job as Attorney General is really important. You're the top cop of the state. Your job should be stopping, you know, robberies of you know, I had a friend, he's in here right now. We work together. He's not from New York. He's from what some people would call flyover state. And he came to New York and he goes to CVS and he says, why is everything behind glass? Why is everything behind locks? This doesn't happen where I'm from. And I said, well, you know, welcome to New York. You know, this is a crime-ridden city. It's a crime-ridden state. And our AG doesn't want to have anything to do with it because she's busy prosecuting me, Trump, the NRA, you know, everyone other than the people that are threatening our security. I take the subway to work every day, and every day on the subway I see some person who's screaming, threatening people, and I always see a little old lady getting scared, grabbing her pocketbook and bringing it closer to her. And I sit here and say, why does it have to be this way? You know, it's a really terrible state of affairs, and it's something that instead of arresting people like that, Letitia James wants to arrest Donald Trump for God knows what, you know. And look, you don't have to be a Trump fan. I'm not necessarily a Trump fan myself, but it's a huge waste of resources and huge waste of time to arrest the guy for paying for Stormy Daniels or something like that, or lying about it. The Supreme Court is the last place, it's the last line of defense to our country. Our executive branch is bought and sold for, you know, bought for and sold, I think. Our Congress is as well. And the only place that can be kind of kept sacred is the court system, which is also now falling to these pernicious things. We have judges that don't care about the law. I was in a court case recently, and generally, I would say 8 or 9 times out of 10, my judges are fair. But I was in a court case recently where the judge didn't even look at any of our evidence, didn't care. She knew I was guilty right away. This is a civil case. And it was against the government. And I didn't get a single chance to get a word in. And we're preying on relief from appeals court and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can't, can't look at every case. It's only 9 people. And the appeals court is your last chance. If the appeals court gets it wrong, you're cooked. And we have judges that will acquit or convict people like Trump, people like me, and even people like you, because they feel like it. And the judge is the closest thing to God in America. They're permanent appointments. They never can be removed. It's something that's really aggressive, and we're seeing politics start to poison the courts. And maybe they've always been poisoned. But the Supreme Court we have now is very much similar to kind of what I'm thinking, that the government's too big. They are trying to dismantle, thankfully, big parts of the government. The recent Supreme Court decision in AMG versus FTC basically stripped the FTC of all its powers, which is incredibly good news in my opinion. The SEC v. Liu decision stripped the SEC of disgorgement power, which is a huge tool they used. They created, like you said, Nora, I mean, they created that tool out of thin air.